2023 affirmative. Copy.
Well, our mission, our department mission, is to improve the quality of life in the community. Our officers work to do that not only by providing response to calls for service or emergencies, but also they operate to solve problems in the community, identify issues and work to correct those so we can achieve that mission of improving the quality of life here.
The City of Rochester is a community of about 97,000 people. It's best known as being the home of the Mayo Clinic. It's in the southeastern toe of Minnesota, about 70 miles south of Minneapolis-St. Paul. We serve an area of 54 square miles and deploy anywhere from 12 to 20 MARC squad cars on any given day.
We explored the idea in 1989 of just looking back to see how frequently a police car arrived at a cardiac arrest before an ambulance. And a colleague and I were intrigued with the notion that placing defibrillators on a trial basis in police cars might be worthwhile.
About a year ago, I was on a cardiac call, and there was a brand new police officer on the call. And while the call was going on, he was talking to me about how this was so much different than the community he had just worked in, where the three agencies were working collaboratively. Our medical director, Dr. White, showed up on the scene as well. And you know, this police officer couldn't believe the cooperation between the agencies. And for me to be on that scene and to see that and to hear it from another emergency responder, it's very rewarding that we've put together a system that we think is second to none.
Coming from a department that didn't have AEDs, it was just a little bit of a transition because I was used to not going to medical calls hardly at all. But once you got used to going to the medical calls, and the device is so easy to use, it is an incredibly useful tool.
I can't imagine that any of them would feel comfortable responding without a defibrillator. Just knowing that having the proper tools to respond to whatever type of call that you have is really critical in an officer's mind. You know, they're not going to go to a bank robbery without their gun. They don't want to go to a heart attack without a defibrillator either.
It made sense to us that if police cars are on the street 24/7 all over the city, if they all have defibrillators, a police car should be able to get to the scene of a cardiac arrest very quickly in the majority of cases.
12 sir for a medical 10 star 3535 Technology Drive Northwest. Male with complaining of possible heart attack. The southeast corner of the building.
36, send me that call. 19th Street, 52. The majority of the medical calls, cardiac-related medical calls that the police respond to, are usually the first responder, the first on scene. It's mostly contributed to the fact that we're out and about, we're in the area, and whereas our fire and ambulance personnel are coming from their stations.
More than once, I have walked away from a cardiac arrest with a police officer by my side, and his telling me that of all the things I do as a police officer, this is the most gratifying and the most rewarding, and I am so grateful to be a part of this initiative.
I am so thankful in my life that I live where I live, had the opportunity to be a part of the community, and I'm so thankful for a trained police officer to come and respond the way he did. He said I was his first save, so it's probably got to be an impact on him.
I've had 3 defibrillator saves, and I obviously look at it incredibly different now, because had we not had these defibrillators and not been trained in it, you know, I wouldn't have that feeling of actually being an integral part of saving someone's life, and you can't even describe how great of a feeling that is.
In 2003, I point to as being our banner year here. We had 15 witnessed VF arrests. We saved 8 of those people. That's 55%. Of those 8 saves, police officers arrived there 7 times first. So that means each one of those saves cost me $187.50.
You often hear different communities or people talking about, aren't defibrillators expensive? How are we to afford them? Especially a lot of departments in Minnesota are 2 or 3 person departments. We can't afford a defibrillator. Well, I hear stories like that and I scoff. No question about it. How can you not afford a defibrillator? There's no other tool that we have that is so directly linked to life and death as a defibrillator. There's grant programs out there, there's other things, but even if you can't get any sort of aid to get a defibrillator, I would hate to be a city council member or a chief of police or anybody else that has to face the family of someone that died of a cardiac arrest when it could have been saved by simply having a defibrillator.
One of the things that we decided in this city at the very outset of the program is that we would monitor, measure, and report everything that we did, everything that we saw. And we would report it in the medical literature so that it was defensible data, objective data, showing the life-saving potential of what we were doing. That's why at the very inception of the program, we designed and continue to measure a time interval called call to shock.
Shock, second shock. Is it clear?
Deliver shock now. Shock delivered. Pause.
Hang on.
If needed, begin CPR.
Yes.
We have shown over and over again that the time from when a call is received until a shock is delivered is the most critical determinant of whether or not a patient survives a cardiac arrest.
2213, 2214, I shipped you a medical, 1201 North Broadway, a possible cardiac.
The reason that sudden cardiac arrest calls take such a high priority is because in terms of trauma, we speak about the golden hour of handling trauma. With sudden cardiac arrest, it's the golden minute.
The benefits of an early defibrillation program to a community like Rochester, which would be like any other community in the United States, are expressed by the people who get resuscitated. They become our spokespersons for the benefits of the program more than anybody else.
My feeling about Rochester having the program that they have with the AED placement and the response of the police, fire and safety, paramedics is unbeatable. It's a fantastic combination that really works for our area. The national average is 1 in 20 people survive, and in the Rochester area, it's like every other one. It's 50% roughly. So, without it, I'm sure we would be somewhere around the national average, and we're better than that here. The morning of November 18th, 2003, wife and I got up and decided to go shopping. Were there for a couple of hours, came home, felt a little tired, so I couldn't help her put things away. I sat in my favorite chair and fell asleep. At least I thought it was asleep. A little while later, she tried to get a hold of me and wake me up, and no response. And she called 911. 4.8 minutes or so later, these 2 gentlemen showed up and saved my life.
Mr. Butroff did not have a pulse. I began preparing the AED to apply the pads to Mr. Butroff and turning the unit on. Once we applied the pads, the AED advised us not to touch the patient. It was analyzing Mr. Butroff's heart rhythm, which we did not. At that time, the AED advised us to deliver 1 shock to Mr. Butroff. We stood clear. I delivered 1 shock to Mr. Butroff. The AED advised us now to continue CPR. We checked for a pulse and respirations. Mr. Butroff now had a pulse. We began respirations. Gold Cross and the fire department arrived, at which time we advised them everything we had done up until that point, and we turned Mr. Butroff over to Gold Cross. When we left Charlie's house that day, Officer Swanson and I stood out front after everybody was gone, and we kind of looked at each other and we thought, holy cow, look what just happened there.